G'day and welcome to Inforunners. I'm Execute, joined today by ExpatBrat and Mr. Moist Noodle. How are you two doing today? Oh,
fantastic! Thank you for having me.
I'm sorry, I was just looking at Expat's face and she's like, what the hell is wrong with that face?
Look at that smile, it's beautiful.
The funny part is that there's some woman somewhere going,
Cut, roll it again.
Yeah. Good. All right, so Expat, this was kind of a little bit of your and my idea, but I saw you talking about it on your stream, and so I kind of wanted to pull you in, and then you thought, oh, this would be a really good discussion to have with Moist, so we've pulled him in as well. So I'll let you kind of talk about what the topic is today, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, so on my stream, I think I ended up going on a little bit of a rant or a maybe a discussion with myself / chat about what the future of the balancing of Star Citizen would be, as far as all the different ships and everything that they're planning on releasing at some of the upcoming shows, maybe CitizenCon, maybe IAE, and what ultimately I've got some ideas of how they should maybe think about starting to get some of these ships in a better situation so that we can really do some testing to see if the gameplay really works, you know. Right now we've got so many ships in the game, and I just thought it would be good to have a conversation about what other people thought about my ideas for how I would imagine it would be a good idea to start balancing the game now that we've got the new arena commander modes. But yeah, it was started somewhere along those lines.
Okay. All right, I'll just do this because I always forget. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. And thank you to those who go the extra mile on Patreon. All right, cool. Now I've got that out of the way.
You sound so professional, dude.
No,
wow.
I am the most unprofessional, but you have to feed the algorithm. It's a pain in the butt, and I really don't like doing it. But
feed the algorithm. Yes.
So I'll put this question to you first then, Moist. So I would say, in my opinion, and this is my humble opinion, I believe at the moment they kind of dirty nerf things. They're really working on Squadron 42, but you're in there. Both you and Expat play the game a lot more than I do. You stream it, especially yourself. You do a lot of PvP content. Would you find that the game is really tailored at the moment around the ships that we have in the game right now? And obviously, I think that's going to change as, you know, now once server meshing hits and they start to bring in the bigger ships, and we kind of see that meta moving from that single fighter to a broader spectrum. So maybe it is time to do what Expat is saying and start looking at balancing on a bigger, broader scale.
So I've been around since day one of the PU, and I've seen the CIG's, what word should I use? The attitude towards balance change a lot. And in the earlier days, they definitely, I think, were trying to balance for the grander plan down the road. But ultimately, what ended up happening was you kind of just ended up with like one ship metas. And that clearly wasn't working. So
we've seen that happen from patch to patch too, haven't we? Where one ship is favored and then the next it's another. Yeah.
I think the game right now is, and this might be a controversial thing to say, in the best spot it's ever been in terms of diversity of ships that you can use. Because, like, back in the olden days...
the best Apple iPhone you've ever bought is the one you buy now, right?
Yeah.
It just gets better with time.
Yeah. You know, I do remember back when... Yep. I know, I do remember days when if you weren't running a Super Hornet with Mantis, then you were going to lose the fight, right? And then it swapped to a Saber, and then it swapped to the Gladius, and it swapped to the Arrow, etc., etc. And unfortunately, while, you know, I do enjoy dogfighting, that kind of arena feel, and when I say arena, I mean, you know, everybody is in that kind of fair loadout where you're both in the same ship, both using the same guns because that's what the meta dictates at the time. It's not very exciting because, you know, my background, I come from, my first ever MMO was EVE Online. And I play a lot of DCS World as well. I play more DCS World than I do Star Citizen at this point.
I've got you've given me a question. So my question to you now, based on what you just said, is do you think in the future that one-on-one duel type dogfighting thing is going to kind of change a bit, and it's going to be more of a team versus team thing going in? Because that's the feeling I'm getting that they're pushing for. So it's not going to be mano on mano. It's going to be more like my group versus your group.
Well, the fact of the matter is that's not what Star Citizen is, right?
At the moment, but I'm talking about down the road.
No, and I don't think that's ever what Star Citizen is going to be. And let me explain why. So the Star Citizen is supposed to be this open world. You be who you want to be. You do what you want to do. And the fact of the matter is that if I play Star Citizen as a pirate, I play a lot with Space Cutler. He's one of my best friends in this community. I come from. Don't tell the police.
She's the police.
I come from a pirate background in EVE Online. I was part of a corporation called Pay Now Inc. Or Pain in EVE Online, and we made a lot of money in EVE Online, and that's what I really enjoy doing. And the fact of the matter is, as a pirate, and it always makes me laugh when I pirate somebody in Star Citizen and their immediate go-to argument was, well, that wasn't fair. Well, no, it wasn't fair. I'm going to turn up with 10 guys. I'm going to bring somebody with a Mantis. I'm going to turn up with a Cutlass Blue. And we're going to do everything we can to catch you in a corner with a grenade launcher, right? So you can't do anything, because at the end of the day, we're here to make money, right? And, you know, that's kind of like my EVE Online mindset. But then I also have the DCS mindset of kind of military operations, right? And again, in terms of thinking of it from a military operation, you don't want it to be a fair fight because you want everybody to come home, right?
Well, you can counter that too, though. You can say, well, why weren't you with escorts? Why didn't you have other people backing you up, you know?
Exactly. And the fact of the matter is, you know, Star Citizen... one of the incredible things about Star Citizen is that we have such a great diversity of different types of ships, right? That allow players to play in different ways, and I love that. I am and my partner, we are very much low flyers and knife fighters and arrows, right? In fact, me and my partner, we fly Aurora MRs a lot because the Aurora MR is one of the best dogfighters in the game, and I will argue that to death.
There's apparently a streamer, wow. I forget the gentleman's name, but apparently he specializes in just taking out hammerheads with Auroras.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't remember the guy's name, but yeah.
The Aurora is a Fox 4 missile, right? Like, you can ram that thing into anything. But
I like
but
not what I meant, Moist, but okay, I get what you mean, but yeah. Okay.
But you know, the game allows you to do what you want to do. I've got friends of mine, like online, who you know, they much prefer the larger ships. A viewer of mine, Tam, who actually ended up being local to me, and we've become good IRL friends now, prefers the larger ships. My friend Tommy Gunmetal always, and Catnuts, they always fly Constellations, and it just allows us all to fly the way that we want to fly. But the point that I'm coming to is, if I'm in an Aurora MR, you know, a Constellation, if I'm fighting a Constellation, that's super tanky compared to if I was fighting somebody in an Arrow, right? Say that person's in a Hammerhead, that Hammerhead is a lot harder to take. And say it's a fully crewed Hammerhead, you know, how do you balance that? Should you balance that? And I'm firmly of the opinion, well, no, of course you shouldn't. Like one person in an Aurora MR shouldn't easily be able to take out a Hammerhead. But then at the same time, it's one person versus, what is it, 8 people, 7 people, whatever. So...
Can I just add a little thing there? Way back in the day, their original concept was that it was going to be rock, paper, scissors. So essentially, capital ships would come down onto like a Constellation, and then a Constellation would come down onto, say, something like a fighter, and then a fighter would be able to take on the capital ship. And it was that whole...
And that's exactly how it should be, and we are starting to see that now, which I'm super happy about. Is it anywhere where near where it should be? Absolutely not. There are a lot of completely useless ships in the game right now, right? Look at the Gladiator. That thing is so incredibly sad. Look at the
Gladiator.
Look at the Ares. The Ares was nerfed completely the wrong way. Like, I was for nerfing the Ares when it came out, but they nerfed it the wrong way.
Have you tried it in the
main issue with
Have you tried in the latest patches?
I actually haven't. I've stuck to my light fighters in the latest.
So I can tell you they're both drastically improved. I think it moves slower, but they aim a lot better. So I think it's in a lot better place than where it should be.
Yeah.
And I think what you're stating there, and Expat, I'll put this to you as well, so you can respond as well. But for me, it feels like that a lot of the older ships are just not where they should be. Yes, there are some outliers like the Ares and the Redeemer, and I can list a bunch of them. But generally, the older a ship is, because we haven't gone back and done all the gold passes yet. They've kind of just been popping them out, and then we know they're going to go back and bring them all up to the same level. So
I disagree with that. And I'll,
okay, that's fine.
An example would be the Hornet, right? Like, the Hornet is so insane right now, and I've seen a lot of people say, well, the acceleration on the Hornet right now is a bug, and that's all well and good, but why has this bug still not been fixed, right? Considering we're all the way through the 320 PTU now, and it's probably going to be releasing to live shortly, right? So I think it's and again, this might be a controversial thing to say, but I think what it comes down to is favorites at CIG, right? The 5 people at CIG that work on Star Citizen, what are their favorite ships? Like, what ships do they actually care about? I know that might sound like a really crazy thing to say, and it sounds very tinfoil hatty, but that's actually how it feels to me. I think there are ships that CIG just don't care about at all, you know?
Well, apparently Chris Roberts' favorite ship is the Phoenix, and we haven't seen anything from that in a while, right?
True.
Wait, I thought it was just the Constellation. I didn't realize it was the Phoenix specifically. I thought it was just the Connie that was his favorite.
He had a bar made about it, but it could be the Constellation in general, yeah.
Well, the Constellation is a fantastic ship. I genuinely think the Connies are one of the best ships in the game right now. Like, there's a guy that I mentioned earlier, Catnuts, and Catnuts is just one of those people. I've watched Catnuts fighting groups of light fighters players in his Constellation, and if you know how to fly that thing, it's an incredibly, especially if you have at least one turret gunner with you, it's an incredibly powerful ship, you know.
So I mean, you've discussed now what you see as the current state of affairs in not all of the ships, but you've pretty much laid out where you think things are now, and that you think the CIG are nerfing things in strange and weird and wonderful ways based on perhaps their what ships they like, whatever week they're interested in them. But what have CIG mentioned that are going to that they're going to introduce regarding ship interiors, engineering, gameplay, first-person shooter, the flight mechanic, and I believe that we're going to have a different EVA as well. So what do you know about what CIG have currently announced from what we've seen in the various videos and SitCon that we can maybe discuss about how that might change things in future, and why
you mentioned
maybe some of the things we're mentioning now aren't going to be relevant tomorrow.
You mentioned engineering, and engineering is actually one of the main things that got me into Star Citizen. The dream of kind of living in that universe, again, people playing the role that they want to play. And somebody that I mentioned again earlier online, he's actually an aircraft engineer in real life, and engineering gameplay is the main thing that he's looking for, right?
Right.
And I'm so excited for the idea of living on a ship, whether it be a Kraken or whether it be just a Carrack and we're out exploring, and having those moments where a relay pops and we have to find a replacement somewhere and we actually have to go scavenging, right? Or go salvaging.
Right.
But in terms of combat, I know that you come from a Sea of Thieves background, right, Expat? And
Yeah.
I think one of the things that is so incredible about Sea of Thieves, and for anybody who's never played Sea of Thieves, I really would recommend giving it a go, because it's a much more tactical game than people would give it credit for. Because as a captain, you have to weigh up the balance of, do you keep people on the guns, or do you send people to go and repair the hull?
He's saying exactly what I've been saying on stream. I love it.
And
I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I'm really, really looking forward to in Star Citizen. Actually having to make those kinds of
choices.
Yeah, exactly. And right now, what choices and decisions do we have to make in Star Citizen? Well,
none.
Obviously,
really.
If I'm a pirate, I have to make sure that I have the right people in my crew, right? And we're bringing the right ships and a mix of ships. There's no point bringing everybody all in arrows, because you're not going to be able to prevent the person from quantuming away, right? Well, do you bring a Cutlass Blue or a Mantis? You bring both, because the Cutlass Blue, it does an incredible job of preventing them from jumping away. The Mantis, if they do jump away, you should have the Mantis in a position where if they jump away, you can pull them out of quantum, right?
But wait, can I expand on that? I mean, we're talking about ship, like what ships you bring to the the fight. But what about on your ship? We're talking about
exactly
micromanagement.
That's the point that I'm making.
Individual ship.
That's the point that I'm making.
Scheme.
I want there to be more of a tactical. Obviously, last night I mentioned it off the recording earlier. I was playing DCS with Bognogus last night. And what we have right now is kind of what I was going through last night with DCS, which was we have this big operation, and I ended up being an overall tactical commander of the battlefield, right? So I was sending F-16s out to run seed missions. So a seed mission is basically suppression of enemy air defenses, right? Taking out SAM sites, because that's the first thing that you need to take out. You can't send in F-18s.
Prep the battlefield.
Yeah, you can't send in F-18s to attack ground targets if there's still SAMs there, right? So I send in the F-16s first, then I send in the F-18s to go do their bombing runs, and then I was flying an Apache with another guy flying an Apache, and we were escorting Hueys who were flying logistics in to drop troops on the ground to take out to take over these air bases, right? And that's kind of what we have with Star Citizen now, in that there's kind of like that overall battlefield kind of tactical decision making in terms of like what ships you take, what order you send them in, etc., etc. But what we don't have right now is the ability for a captain to run their ship, and that's the thing that I've always wanted in Star Citizen. It's one of the things that got me excited about Star Citizen when Chris Roberts was kind of selling the promise of it. And yeah, it's one of the things I'm most looking forward to. I know that they've shown off engineering gameplay a little bit. They showed us the graph of the Hammerhead. I think it was like 2 years ago now or something like that.
Keep going before COVID, yeah.
Yeah, and they we know that they have been working on the relay system, because it's been mentioned quite a few times in monthly reports over the last couple of years. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to allowing captains to run their ships.
So
it's breaking down a structure.
Oh yeah, go execute. Go for it.
Well,
I was gonna just expand on the captaincy part of it. So just in case anybody hasn't played Sea of Thieves, I wanted to finish off Moist Noodle's point there, which is, on Sea of Thieves, basically, you're a ship captain, and there's 3 different sizes of ship, and obviously, your captaincy role, gains in kind of not importance, but like the complication of it increases the larger the ship size. So, but ultimately you're managing between the same different things. When you're on the wheel as the captain, for example, you're in charge of like the navigation, right? And you're overlooking the entire ship. But your ship can have like engines, which are the sails, and that determines the speed and your maneuverability within the battle. You've got your cannons, which are your weapons, your laser guns or whatever in Star Citizen, and you've got the repairs, which would be, you know, say the engineering gameplay, fighting fires, which is in Sea of Thieves plugging holes so you don't sink. And through the individual combat that you're having, you may be part of a larger scale battle, but your ship itself has a battle raging upon it. And actually, you can even get boarded, and other people, you could send people from your ship to board another ship, but you have a limitation of 4 crew members. So you're constantly reassigning crew members to reduce your damage output because you're taking a guy off the cannon, but increasing your repairability because you're sending them to repair like a hole or something. You're either turning the sails and increasing your maneuverability to gain an advantage, or you're firing the cannons, increasing your firepower, or you've got no firepower, you've got no maneuverability, and every single person is fighting on deck. And that would be you with your guns in your ship shooting at people coming in. So that's kind of where we're going with the Sea of Thieves comparison. And I guess we can move on from that because you have a background of you know, what we're trying to elaborate on here.
And that's what he meant by captaincy stuff, right? The ability to assign and move people around and all that. And I think now might be a good time, because I was saying before the show there is a lot of caveats to this. Like, so there's a lot of things that we don't have in the game right now. So we know the time to kill is going to come down. I've been watching a lot of people do the master modes, and the time to kill has definitely gone up. Sorry, I said down. I meant to say up. Sorry, I said that the wrong way the first time. We've just seen the infancy of the component system come in. So right now, like, the biggest thing is that, like, a drive to get across the universe faster. But, you know, we've got the coolers really haven't come in, you know, the shields and all that type of thing. Like, they're all in their infancy. Just a counterpoint to what you were saying, Moist, about how everything is really, you don't think it's going to be about teamwork. I think it's going to be not just like what you guys are stating on one ship working together. I think it's going to be crews of ship like you're suggesting. But I also think you're like, right now, the ships that you kind of mentioned were all kind of small. I think you're going to get that triangle of defense. So you're going to have, like, and I'm just going to pick random ships here. Don't take me on the ships I pick, but you could have like a really big hammerhead and then a couple of small little arrows, and then, like, you know, like your mantis and the things like that. It's a complete package suite that you're going to try and bring to bear on the enemy, right? And I think you can play every little strength.
But I think that's ultimately spreading out the, like, I would say, you know, likely if you've got like something like a hammerhead there, you know, those arrows and stuff are spreading out, you know, your firepower. You know what I mean? They're contributing to the ultimate goal, right?
Let me just throw something else in, right? We keep talking about pyro, right? And the range of pyro, right? If you can get a hammer to head to the location, you might not be able to get arrows to the location. So once you bring distance into the fold, it also changes what you bring to bear on the enemy. It also changes what you have as defense, because if it's your home place, you might have stronger things than they do. Do you take ballistics? Do you take lasers? Because you have to travel all the way over there, so you can't refuel your ballistics or, you know, or rearm.
Yeah. One of the most important things for any military is logistics, and for any one pilot in real life, there are, I think it's something like 9 people in the background running logistics, whether they are a truck driver or some sort of mechanic or whatever, you know. And I think, you know, when pyro comes out, and you bring up a really good point, it's going to change gameplay a lot, because what it's really going to drive home is the importance of logistics, right? How do you get smaller ships like arrows and gladiuses, which will be needed, from A to B in pyro? You know, how are you going to get resources such as food and fuel around? Where are you going to find those things? Do you bring them in from Stanton? And you know, that's something I'm super excited about, because again, there are people who play Star Citizen who just want to do things like run logistics, right?
There are.
And we're talking about being a captain of a ship, right? And again, that's something I'm super excited about. There are just so many layers You have the people who are just sitting in their single seat fighter. Then you have the people who want to be captains of ships like Connie's, right? But then you have people who might want to run orgs, right? And that's a layer above that. And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing, I don't know if we'll ever get a mechanic like Alliances from EVE Online, but even if we don't get an actual mechanic for it, you'll get unofficial alliances between organizations.
They have talked about hiring people as your crew. So even if it's just for one-off battle, you could put out the call and hire a whole bunch of people for just one said battle. I reckon that'll be a thing.
So you know, we will see people who might be running alliances who essentially are, you know, like you have that one person in their arrow and all they have to worry about is their arrow, and then you have the captain and they only have to worry about their crew, while you have the people above that who have to worry about entire fleets, right? So I think Pyro.
So you're going to have large chain of command, basically.
Exactly.
Potentially large chain of command structures, but what about when you boil it down to the mano y mano, the one-on-one, the Connie versus Connie? You know, at the end of the day, like we can talk about how the balance of the game can ultimately be scaled up by the number of friends you have and the number of resources you have at your disposal. I mean, that's corp on corp warfare, right? And, you know, a corporation coming down on a single trader doing his little trade route in Pyro, unless that trader has some serious friends that he can call in extremely quickly, or he has some extremely Han Solo style piloting skills, likely, do you think numbers are going to overwhelm the individual?
I've been in situations where, I've been in my arrow on my own and I've fought an entire org. Now, I know I don't want to sound arrogant, right? I'm not saying that I'm the best PvPer in the world. I try my best, all right? But all it comes down to is, you know, in those situations, I happen to be the best person on the field, right? You know, you mentioned a constellation. I mentioned my friend Catnuts earlier, right? I've seen situations, and I mentioned it earlier, where I've seen Catnuts fighting multiple people. And in that situation, it simply comes down to who has the most experience, who has the most skill. What I really look forward to, something that CIG is kind of working towards, right? And actually, I'll pivot first. I'll talk about components, right? Because XQ mentioned components a few minutes ago.
I've got written down here components and loadout, because I think that's the other part of it. Sorry.
Yeah, one of the things that I've really complained about for a while with Star Citizen is, and then one of the things that I've been really frustrated by is the fact that in ways the game has gotten better. We have more missions now than we've ever had before, but the quality of those missions, in my opinion, is lacking, right? Now, a friend of mine who used to work for CIG, Jerry, made a couple of incredible missions for Star Citizen. He made the Caterpillar mission. I forget what it's called, and he made the 890 jump mission.
Jerry, you're
right?
a hero. That's a great one.
Yeah. And those are great missions, and I know he really struggled and had to think outside the box when it came to, you know, what the tools that he had available to him to make those missions. But when I think back to the oldie days of Star Citizen, the Tessa Bannister mission, right? The black box missions, in my opinion, were the best missions that CIG ever made for Star Citizen. They were so...
We'll talk about those, but I've never seen them before. Can you briefly describe it?
Yeah, so essentially the way it worked was you went to a comm array, and there was a lady who would contact you called Tessa Bannister. And it was all voice acted. And she was hilarious. You know, she would mention emergency beacons. Oh, sorry, beacons.
Distress bacon. I mean, distress bacon.
Yeah. And
sorry, I haven't had breakfast.
She was just a really lovable character, and the fact that the voice acting was there was really immersive, right? So she'd send you to these distress beacons, and you would fly there. And you would see a wreck of a ship surrounded by asteroids, and you would get out, and you'd see a flashing light, and you go over it, and it's over to it, and it's a black box. and you grab the black box, and it would start playing an audio recording of the last moments of that pilot's life. Like, and they would be telling you a little bit about their life. Oh, I came here to make a living, but I ended up just, you know, destroying my life or whatever, right? And it made you really feel emotional and bad for these people, right? And I think there was like 5 or 6 you'd have to go and hunt, and then at the end of the quest line there was a boss that you would have to fight, and it was just such an incredible story arc. It was a story, and it was really nice to follow. And
side quest. Yeah,
and I haven't, you know, it made the game feel a bit like an MMO, and we've not really had that since. And, you know, that was removed from the game. And to bring it back to the point that I was making with the components, one of the things I've been really frustrated with over the last 2 or 3 years is that in ways, the game is doing well. We have more missions than we've ever had before, but at a lower quality, in my opinion. Back in the olden days, we had a variety of components, which we still have the components there, but they were all balanced differently. So back then,
choices could be made.
You would end up having a meta, but you could make choices, and all those components worked in different ways. Whereas then a couple of years ago, they just made everything flat across the board, right? And there are plenty of experiences where the game has kind of gone backwards. And the reason I think for that is because, you know, there's 5 people at CIG who work on Star Citizen and like 1,000 working on Squadron 42. And, you know, those 5 people are trying their best to do what they can with what they've got and the time that they're given. And the fact of the matter is, at some point, they have to make the decision, okay, do I work on A or do I work on B? I have to work on one or the other. Okay, I'm going to work on A, so I'm just going to cut B, right? Or I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make A possible. And it's kind of disappointing. And I was going to come to a point.
Oh, go for it.
No, I was just going to say, I was going to come to a point about components, and I can't quite remember what it was now, but yeah, sorry, continue.
Well, I mean, if I could elaborate on that, you know, and potentially find that, you've added components into the large mix, the large ingredients, that's all going to go into having to ultimately balance this game to be, you know, engaging, fun, sometimes unfair, and that's okay. When I was having my discussions with chat on stream, I hadn't even thought about choosing your loadout, right? But choosing your loadout is going to be a huge thing from the gear that each individual crew member is wearing on the ship. I mean, I believe that we're not going to be able to wear our fancy heavy armor flight suits when we're sitting in a turret, for example. So, you know, as soon as you have to send a guy to repair something or send a guy to potentially defend the airlock from intruders of the ship, that person is going to have to gear up first, right? So it's not going to be such a quick decision, quick moment between taking a turret gunner and turning them into a first-person shooter, you know? So yeah, ultimately what I want to try and, you know, get to here is we've got all these different ingredients that are going to all clash with each other, and somehow all those ingredients have to be thrown into this massive stew, which is Star Citizen, the game, the fun game that you want to pick up and play every day. How do you think, with the number of ships we have at the moment, with the number of still unreleased features that are going to have to have a pivotal impact on gameplay, how do you think that they are going to? What do you think is going to be the best way forward as far as getting to some kind of consensus where everyone thinks, okay, this is a fun and balanced game? I mean, right now we've got Auroras all the way up to 890 jumps, all the way up to Hammerheads, all the way, you know, we've got so many different ships in between, and they're talking about releasing more. So with the introduction of all these new features and everything, how are we going to balance it?
I think
it's
part of it. I think that is the part of it. Like, if you've got so many different features, you can't just have one ship that does everything. And,
No.
you know, you look at all the components, the loadout, the armor, the different gameplay still to come. Like, we've got one E-War4 ship. We've got, you mentioned the Gladiator, the torpedo bombers, missiles don't work properly, torpedoes don't work properly. There is just so much gameplay out there. EMPs don't work properly. You know, you mentioned different sets of armor. We've got Titan suits that we know that are coming. You know, like we've got ground warfare. We've got in atmosphere warfare. We've got space warfare. So there is no I win ship for everything. You combine all those things together, and I think and then you add in scenarios and distance and environmental effects and all that type of thing. There is never going to be a perfect ship. You are not going to go from I win to I win to I win. You are going to have to go back and reconfigure almost every scenario. So if you are in a fight and you win, if you don't just go back and change for the next one, you might get caught out and lose. Eventually, you're going to lose. You can't just keep pushing the envelope.
In terms of balance, it really does, I think, come down to iterate, right? Now, I think the thing that's really difficult for Star Citizen and difficult for CIG is, and you kind of mentioned it, there are still so many ships to come, and there are also roles of vehicles to come, right? And now we're seeing a light tank being added to the game. And every time you add a new role of ship, I think it kind of throws that balance out of whack, right?
More complexity, more to balance.
Yeah, and something that I've kind of seen through my 37 years on this planet and playing video games since the IBM era, is that, you know, if you look at the modern Call of Duty games today, Squad, Battlefields, Overwatch, those development companies don't just go, okay, the game's released, it's balanced now, right? Like on a weekly basis, they're constantly rebalancing things, right?
Constantly,
and it is constantly being iterated on. So I think things will get better, but at the same time, it's also, and I mentioned the Ares earlier, which is the perfect example of this conversation, it's also really difficult to balance when there are still technical issues with the game. And the reason I mentioned the Ares, and I mentioned earlier that I thought the Ares had been nerfed in the wrong way. So the issue with the Ares when it came out, the Ion specifically, was that literally every single person was flying the Ion when that ship came out. I am not exaggerating. I would be in my Arrow and I would go to Port Olisar and there's like 5 Ions there. I would go to Grim Hex and there's Ions there. I would go to Hurston, there's Ions there. Every single bounty hunter that was coming for me was coming with an Ion. And of course, CIG, they look at the analytic data and they go, okay, why are 99% of players all flying the same ship? Oh, because there's something up with it. Now, the issue, in my opinion, wasn't actually the ship at the time. I think the ship was fine. The issue with the Ion was the flight model, and it was also the god-awful positional desync in the game at the time, which isn't as bad now as it was back then. Now, an example that I will give you, again, we'll talk about the Ion, is that, say I had a bounty hunter come after me, I'm in my Arrow, they're in an Ion, I would start fighting them, and obviously I don't want to, you stay away from the pointy end, right? So I would get over the top of them. In fact, I will use my my P-51 training aid and my Eurofighter Typhoon training aid, right? So we're nose to nose like this. So I don't stay in the front. I obviously want to try and get over the top, or I want to get underneath. Ideally, I want to get behind them, right? Well, the problem is, once you start positioning yourself where you're hitting them and they're not hitting you, what do? They immediately get to maximum speed. And what happens then when you're at maximum speed? Back then, when the positional desync was god-awful, you would start desyncing. Now, because you're both traveling in the same direction, what would happen is on my screen, I am literally 100 meters away from the Ares and I'm over the top of them. On their screen, I'm actually 1 kilometer away and I'm basically showing them either the belly or the back of my ship, and they would just one-shot me because big gun, right? And that was, at the time, the issue with the Ares. It was the positional desync and what basically the flight model encouraged people just to fly fast, to fly defensively, right? To bring it back to the point that I'm making is it's very difficult to balance a game when you have these kind of technical issues. Like Execute, you mentioned missiles, right? Missiles are goddamn awful right now. And look, I will say there are, in real life, I don't think it's necessarily that healthy and helpful to compare things to real life all the time, because at the end of the day, Star Citizen is a game, and it should first and foremost be it should be fun, right? If I want pure simulator, I'll go play DCS, but what I actually want is the feeling of living in this sci-fi universe. And what isn't necessarily
immersion, right?
Exactly. And what I don't necessarily find fun is just a non-stop barrage of missiles coming at me, which is fine, because if I'm in an arrow and I'm fighting a Shrike, I'm obviously going to expect to have a lot of missiles thrown at me. But when those missiles are unflareable, that's a problem for me. Like, countermeasures need to work. And again, it's really hard to balance a game when flares don't work, right? When missiles just get glued to you.
So it sounds like it might be as much of an uphill struggle as I'm concerned about. But if you don't mind, do you mind me telling you guys what my suggestion was as far as how we could potentially go forward? And you can tell me why I'm dead wrong and why it's the worst idea.
I've still got...
But I basically...
Before you go into to fixes, I still have some things I actually want to discuss. So for me, Moist mentioned that they only have 5 people working there, and so it's a smaller team. When you have a smaller team, you have a bias, right? So if you've just got one person working as a balancer, that they don't do so well. But as soon as you add another...
Can I just point out, I don't actually think there's only 5 people working. I'm just hyperbole.
But I'm trying... I remember a discussion I had with Space
He knows them all by name.
So I had a discussion with Space Cutlass once, and for an hour and a half, and he was trying to convince me that CIG should hire him to balance the game. And I had to explain to him how, as soon as they put him in there, he would have a bias. And he goes, well, then put a team with me. And then I was like, yeah, but then as soon as you have a team, they'll assign a producer to you, and the producer would instantly put you on something else that was more viable.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think one of the parts I'm trying to say is this is a cart for the horse scenario, where once Squadron 42 is out of the way, I think we'll see a more, as more people come in to work on Star Citizen, a lot of these things will naturally get a lot more movement and move out of the way. And I think we are moving into that, because we know Squadron 42 is starting to round the corner now and get to that.
Well, the first Squadron 42, the first of 3.
Well, we know
that was always the day. Do you think they're going to move that many people along if they're talking about DLCs and stuff like that?
So the plan was always to build out a first team for Squadron 42, and then when they got Squadron 42 out the door, they were going to then build a second team to work on Star Citizen. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing Manchester roll out, we're seeing Frankfurt roll out, and Montreal roll out, and they're all pushing into that Star Citizen territory. There are even teams on the roadmap that have finished their work on Squadron 42. So there was, and don't quote me on this because it was been a little while since I read it, but there was a lot of people working on vehicles. They've all finished. There's no more vehicles required, as in ground vehicles, for Squadron 42. So they're fully on PU vehicles now.
Okay.
Right. So I just wanted to bring that up. So I think it is a cart for the horse, and I think that's a lot of the case of what I'm seeing hear you guys talk about is that there's just things like gameplay's not there, components are not there, loadouts are not there. A lot of the weapons act the same, a lot of the shields act the same, all the components act the same. Like there is a little variation, and it's like you said, there's just not enough people to work on Squadron 42, and so it does feel a bit samey. And I think it's as we round that corner and we now, like, I think, let's be honest, this game has moved at a glacial pace because we just have not seen what they've been doing with Squadron 42. And I think once they can get more people on this, I think everything's going to change. More gameplay, more things to do, more balance, everything we've said in this discussion today, because everything from the number of ships, like you can't honestly tell me, Moist, when most of the ships in the game right now are small, and yet we've got medium, large, and capital to come, that's not going to change the landscape by at least 50%.
Yeah, but that's only because you know, you can't really add a javelin to the game right now, because the javelin also requires lots of the game needs to be balanced for a javelin, all right? And actually, I would argue that it's those things that would have to be added to the game to make it balanced to have. It's like the hull E.
Exactly.
There's no point having the hull E in the game right now, because
and I'll give you an example that you kind of use, the Ares. I think it's another horse before the cart scenario.
Yeah,
there's not enough capital ships for that thing to be viable. Yet you're trying to balance it so it goes up against a Gladius or an Arrow, and you're surprised you're getting your ass kicked. That's the thing that's meant to kick your ass. You know, that's why it's kicking your ass, because you're meant to be kicking the ass of the bigger thing. It is. It's an outlier ship, by the way. It's the opposite of most ships. So the small's meant to stuff the big, as I said earlier, and then the big, the medium, the small. So
specifically talking about the Ares as well, something this really does drive home the cart before the horse scenario is armor, physicalized armor.
Yep, absolutely.
And people forget about this all the time. We're supposed to have this physicalized armor system, right? Which means that weapons will have to have penetration values, right? So you won't be able to have an Aurora MR or an Arrow or a Gladius just picking away at a Hammerhead anymore, because guess what? Those guns don't penetrate the armor.
Well, it also,
and that's where the Ares really comes in.
It goes a step further. It depends how they actually work out armor. Like, is it going to penetrate? But is it also going to penetrate and diminish? Like we've seen things recently, like if you put a skin on the Ares Inferno, do you know it actually removes the armor texture completely?
Oh, really?
So one of the things we're theorizing is, what if armor is just a texture, and as you shoot it, it gets damaged, and it's a part of the wear and tear system, and it falls off.
Yeah, well, so that's kind of what I'm expecting.
And that makes sense if you think about it, because then lasers regenerate, shields regenerate, ballistic is finite, and armor is finite. That sounds like balance to me. So, thanks for watching. Look forward to part 2 coming in 2 days' time. Don't forget to like, ring the notification bell, and thank you to all those that have gone that extra mile on Patreon that you can now see on screen.